Hi, this is Chris, Video Game Dust Sleeves, and you're listening to the VGDS podcast with Bones06,
What's going on, everybody?
DanCavDragon,
How's it going?
and guest gamer Bargain Bin Hobo.
When the bad games are out, all you have to do is shout now who's gonna hobo up.
That's pretty good.
Thank you.
Alright, sleeve it or leave it. First title, Starcraft 64. Bones?
That is the yes. I already have it sleeved.
Nice.
DanCav?
Yeah, I would say let's leave this game.
And Bargain Bin?
I'm going to respectfully leave it because I'm not really into strategy, but I definitely understand its appeal and impact that it's had.
Next title, Kirby's Adventure for the NES. Bargain Bin?
Obvious sleeve.
Bones?
I feel compelled to say yes. And you know what? Today I'm going to say yes.
And Dan?
Kirby, I would sleeve, yes.
Next title, Ultima III Exodus. Bones?
Nah, I'm going to skip it.
Bargain Bin?
I'm gonna skip it as well, mainly because I've only heard of it, never actually played it, so I have no idea what it is. So I'm gonna politely leave it.
Dan?
Yeah, I would leave it. I actually remember buying this game when it first came out. I had high hopes for it. I remember it being a little bit more expensive because it was an RPG and had like a big book with it. But I was sorely disappointed by it. It was very unplayable on the NES. I know it's a popular PC series, and but yeah, these games did not make a good transition to the NES, so I would leave it.
Alright, last title, Quake 4 for Xbox 360. Dan?
I would leave it. I feel like this is too new to like sleeve.
Bones?
I love Quake, but yeah, I'd leave this too.
And Bargain Bin?
I'm pretty sure this is multiplayer only, so that automatically qualifies it for a leave it.
And what do all these games have in common?
They have sports.
Yep, every single one of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Next segment, guess that box art. This one should be fairly simple.
I don't know what this is, so I'm gonna do the very wrong answer. I'm gonna say that's Richard Simmons finally snaps for the NES.
It looks like straight up stranger danger to me, man.
This is the box art style Dan's likes.
Yeah, I know these. I won't. I can answer if you need it too, but
I'm pretty sure I know the second one, but
I think I
dude,
do too.
this first one's really creepy.
Alright, so it's an Atari 2600 game, if that hint didn't give it away.
That kind of explains it.
Dude, that hint went right over my head. I'm still creeped
For-
out by
for-
this dude's
for-
hair with the hand and the balloon looking for candy.
For what I
this-
said about Dan, you didn't know that was a 2600 game?
I kind of figured, but I'm just like mesmerized. This dude's mustache is freaking me out. Like, everything about it is creepy.
He
Does not
almost looks
surprise
like
me. It's a
Richard Simmons
2600
as a
game.
ringmaster, doesn't he?
Oh, you're on the right track.
yeah, I mean, it's exactly.
You
what
just said
think it looks like.
ringmastered. So, what is a ringmaster? The
Circus.
yes.
Yeah.
So, it's circus what?
Soleil.
Circus Jerkus.
I mean, actually, I think if you have the Sears version of this game, it is just called.
It is just called
Circus.
circus, but there's this particular version is circus blank. Starts with an A, and it's basically we already said the word.
Circus system it's on.
Yeah.
Circus Atari.
Yes.
Yay!
You got it.
Never heard of it. Don't want to.
It's you know, there's variations of this game on like every single old console, where you have clowns bouncing them off a trampoline into the sky and popping balloons. That's kind of is that type of game. So
One of my old computer games had a mini game with that very premise.
yeah, so this is basically the Atari version. He uses the paddles. But Chris, I didn't ask you for a 3D sleeve of this yet, right?
No.
Okay.
Don't.
You know, well, eventually I want I love all the box art for the Atari games, and I want them all sleeved at some point. But yeah, I don't remember this box art being that great, though, to be honest.
Yeah.
again.
A
No,
lot.
it's not
Well,
great.
honestly, a lot of the Atari 2600 box art is kind of like this fashion, this
Yeah.
style.
Yeah, it's like
It's like
drawn,
hand
painted.
drawn, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Basically.
yeah.
So I think the second one is Tetris for the Game Boy.
Yes, that was an easy one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And added it too. Which one's the port?
Tetris.
Yeah, yeah.
Easy.
Yep. All right, Bones.
All right, guys. Now after that weird guessing the box art, let's move on to logo sleeve of the month. And this month we have dongled sleeves. They are pretty damn neat, I have to say.
And I
his is
could troll
definitely
him
really
and
cool.
put Wolverine
So,
on the
who
NES
wants-
in there, but I'm gonna be nice to him today. I'm either gonna put Castlevania or Metroid because I know he loves both of those.
All right, good choices.
Nice. Yep.
Very good. And if anyone is interested in picking up one of his logo sleeves, just contact Chris at Video Game Dust Sleeves, and he will accommodate.
I highly recommend you check his channel because he is seriously a really cool YouTuber. He's super funny.
I like the dark sleeves too, but every time I look at something like that, I'm like, man, Chris is gonna burn all his black ink out printing this thing.
It's all right.
He knew the job was dangerous when he took it.
Yeah.
Do you use more black ink than anything else?
No, believe it or not, I use more magenta than anything else.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, I was gonna say there's a game for for this. When I saw the sleeve, there's a game for the NES, and you probably have it, Bones. It's called like Xexes. It's like some black cartridge with like space on it. It's for the NES.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
I
have
think
it.
that one too, actually.
I think that would look good in the sleeve.
Yeah, well, yeah. anyway.
Yeah, back to franchise in a month. All right, and hopefully this is a nice, straightforward, simple. The Red Dead Revolver or Red Dead Redemption series. It spans, quite a few consoles. PlayStation, starting with PS2. I put Gun on here. It's not really part of this franchise, but it came out around the same time, and a lot of people lump it together as Western themed video game that came out around the same time and really started the interest in this Red Dead series in general. I brought this up because I was at we had like a neighborhood picnic, and I was talking to one of the other dads in the neighborhood who has grown-up boys, and then we were talking about video games for some reason, and somebody brought up the fact that I have a big video game collection, and so the dad was like, "Oh, do you have Red Dead Redemption 2?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have that game." He goes, "Oh, that's the best game ever. I've spent so much time on this game, and it's like one of the best games ever." And I was like, "Huh, I didn't expect this dad to be that into it." And I do have the game, but I didn't really put a lot of time into it. I was one of those games where I put it in, and I was like, "Oh, this game's gonna take forever for me to play. I don't really want to play it right now." But it made me think that, hey, this game might be way more popular than it really is. So I'm curious to see if anybody else has played this or has gotten into the series and what you think of it. So take it away, Bones.
Well, I believe I have every single one of them games that you actually have up there. I played through some of Red Dead Revolver. I played some Gun. And then after that, I did not play any of the other ones. So I do have them. Actually, no, I don't have the Red Dead 2. I've been a stickler. I watched my sister's fiance, well, now husband, play that. And he put a lot of time into it. I don't know, anything that's big and open world anymore, I'm just kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to be able to put that many hours into it. So I don't really start. I bet you I didn't even make it halfway through Gun. I didn't even get that again because that was one I traded away years ago. I probably within the last year and a half have just reacquired Gun. I don't know if I'm going to go back to honestly playing it. I think I'll throw it in just for nostalgia reasons one day, but I don't know.
That's an open world game too?
No, it's a little different.
It's not such an open world, just has a big map.
it's they're not the type of game that I get sucked into. Even Red Dead Revolver, was not a game that I was so enthused to try to get all the way through. So it's a good franchise, but for me, it never really tickled my fancy.
All right, that's interesting. I should just point out that the Red Dead series is by Rockstar, the makers of Grand Theft Auto. We really needed Dizzy here to give his. I really wonder if he's played it, being such a big Rockstar or Grand Theft Auto fan. But how about you, Bargain?
So I'm actually kind of a square opposite of Bones. I have all these games barring Red Dead 2, and I have had a great time. Gun actually beat that game earlier this year. Fantastic game, great story, great gunplay. The final boss is kind of annoying, but I'll just leave that there. Really enjoyed that one. And then Red Dead Revolver originally had on the PS2 and on the PS3 is like the PlayStation Classics. And then I was informed by fellow YouTuber Dolly Popka that the Xbox version is actually better. So I went and got that, and what I've seen, it is a little better, but darn it, I need to say right now that Red Dead Revolver has some irritating sections. And I will just leave it there. I would definitely say try Red Dead Revolver, though. Now, I briefly touched Red Dead Redemption, played a couple missions, and then wound up shooting an exploding barrel and setting a building on fire. And it was a day, let me tell you. And then I hit the barrel. I don't think the building caught fire, but I shot exploding barrel, and I'll just say it was a day from there. I played a little bit of Undead Nightmare, but I did hear you could actually find a unicorn and ride the sparkly rainbow unicorn around the zombie infested hellhole.
Is that true?
Apparently, I think I have to look into that. But yeah, I also, a little side tangent here. Red Dead or Wild West needs more representation in games. Like, my dad is a huge Wild West movie buff. He has seen all the noteworthy ones. All his Ring Challenger Wild West themes. And there is not that there aren't more Wild West games. You got Call of Juarez, and you have Gunsmoke on the NES, and there's probably more that are escaping me at the moment. But I really wish there were more games in the Wild West, because that is an underutilized setting in games, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree about there need to be more Western games. I was just talking to one of my friends the other day about whether you don't really see that many Western movies in that genre in general these days, and is that a genre that's just, back in the 50s or 60s there was a tons of Western TV shows and movies, and it's just a matter of time. It was gone away over time, and they always try to revive the Lone Ranger every so often, and it fails miserably at the box office, so it goes away for several more years. So I'm just curious if that Western theme is just something that is beyond our rescue at this point. But hopefully not. I agree that we need more games in this genre. Undead Nightmare, yeah, this shows that even this series is not immune to having a zombie version of it made.
Of course not. Everything has to have zombies.
Yeah.
Soon there's gonna be zombie Teletubbies one day.
But yeah, and then but yeah, thanks for the insight. Those are all great feedback. It sounds like this is a series not to miss. And the one good thing is all these games are pretty cheap. You can really add them for not much at all. So if you missed any of these, they won't break the bank at all for you to go pick them up.
And you don't have to rob the bank either. Don't
yeah. Yeah. And finally for Chris, have you played these games? Do you own any of these games?
I think I own like one, the Nightmare game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's on the Xbox 360. Or no, Xbox One.
I have the Red Dead Redemption 1 and Undead Nightmare on PS3 myself.
Yeah, other than that, that's all my knowledge. I don't really know anything else. I've seen gameplay, obviously, but
also the Red Dead Revolver has a 4-player multiplayer mode, and it's really fun.
Red Dead Revolver, you said?
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it for Franchise of the Month. Short and simple, I think.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. All right, on to the topic, which is ports. If you haven't guessed that by now. This is brought to you by Bargain Bin Hobo.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And here we go. Question 1 out of 10. Not all ports are created equal. What is one port of a game that is better than the others? Bones?
Well, for me, this is actually kind of hard because I don't normally play tons of different ports. I mean, it's easy to go on some for older consoles, I guess I could go for that. So I would say probably like an easy one that anybody would say would be Mortal Kombat on the Genesis versus Super Nintendo, just because the blood code and things like that.
Oh, for sure.
I'm trying to think of one that's a little more unique, though.
If you can't, that's fine.
No. I mean, I'm trying to think like towards Sega CD maybe, or something along those
There's
lines.
a very good one for Sega CD.
Oh yeah.
Like, that's what I mean. I know there's one on Sega CD. Like, I mean, you can always say Terminator.
Or Final Fight.
Yes, I was gonna say the Final Fight for sure.
But what else was? I mean, yeah, you're right. That was on Super Nintendo. But yeah, that would probably be what I would go with.
All right, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, for this one, I mean, I could view this as many ways, like ports being from like PC to console, or like from arcade to home,
However
or
you want to see it.
yeah, or
A
like
port is a
handheld
port.
to console or back. I think a lot of these questions cover that, but
Pretty much.
yeah, but the thing that sticks out for me, well, I did have on here, I had 2 games from back in the more 8-bit days or 16-bit days, but Double Dragon for the Sega Master System was a lot better than the NES version at the time, because the Sega Master System version had like 2-player cooperative play, and it was more authentic to the arcade original. Like all the levels were there and stuff. The NES was a little more derivative, but in its own right, it's okay. It's it's nostalgic and classic at this point, but it wasn't like the arcade game very much. And so if you had to do a comparison between which one did the better job of the arcade conversion, it was definitely Double Dragon for the Sega Master System, and they used it at the time in their advertising and marketing campaign. They were hyping up the fact that theirs was like the real version of Double Dragon, not the NES version. The other game was, we already mentioned, Final Fight CD for the Sega CD. Back in the day, Final Fight was a popular arcade game. It got ported over to the SNES first, I believe. But they had to make some sacrifices. They had to take out one of the characters, and then they ended up taking out Guy. And then later on, they released Final Fight Guy because a lot of people wanted that guy. They really wanted that character in the game, and so they put him back in, and at the expense of somebody else, But Final Fight CD was the version that had all 3 of them in there. You could play, 2 players at the same time, and the soundtrack was also really cool because it had like a CD soundtrack, plus it had voice acting, which wasn't particularly good, but it's still kind of cool to hear like characters speaking and stuff. So the Sega CD version was definitely, for me, the best version of that game.
Bargain bin.
So you're all expecting me to say that Monster Madness game, aren't you? But no, not this time. So the version I'm going to say that's better than its relatives is X-Men Origins Wolverine on the Xbox 360 and PC. There's a lot of versions of that Wolverine movie game, and let me just say this right now: everyone hates the movie. I like it. Fight me. Anyway, so there's the PS2 and Wii version. They're just like a kind of a beat 'em up. They're fine, but they're not the greatest thing ever. Then there's the DS and PSP versions, which are both different, all made by different teams. But then there's the HD version, like I mentioned, the Uncaged edition. It's basically God of War if Kratos was wearing a Wolverine costume. And it plays really well. It's really fun. It kind of expands on the movie's story, adds in characters like Mystique at one point. She wasn't even in the movie that I'm aware of. And if she was, well, I haven't watched the movie in a while, but it's also, it really nails Wolverine's character because it shows how human he can be. Like at one point he rescues a little girl, and he stops. Like in the movie, he stops his brother from killing somebody at one point. But anyway, that version is definitely better than the others. Though that's not to say the other versions are bad. I'd say a lot of good games came from that movie, but the HD version, for my money, literally one of my favorite games ever, and that should tell you something because I struggle to pick favorites. There's just so many.
Yeah, I will say that you mentioned this game before in a previous podcast, and I immediately hunted it down because you made it sound so great. So thank you for that. I got exactly the version you recommended.
Awesome.
Number 2, how about a port that's worse than the others? Dan?
Let's see. Well, I already mentioned like Double Dragon being worse, on the NES than the other versions, but Aladdin came out for the SNES and Genesis at the same time. I like the Genesis a lot better because the animation was a lot better. It was done actually by like Disney artists and stuff. So they did. I feel like more authenticity or more love or more care went into creating Aladdin for the Genesis than it did. They handed it over to the for SNES. They handed it over to the team at Capcom, who had done a lot of platforming, Disney games at the time. And it's this okay game on its own right, but I feel like the Disney touch is really on the Genesis version. So the SNES version, I feel, is worse than the Genesis version. And the other game that is, I could sit here probably think of several, but the one game that sticks out is, I was a big Dragon's Lair fan in the arcade. That's a full motion video game with laserdisc game. That's hard to convert to a system that's not powerful enough. That's probably some other question in this podcast, but when they converted this game to like the NES, it became like a side scroller platformer, but they tried to make it very like the arcade in terms of like you just pushed once and then your character would move with the delay and kind of making it feel like it stopped. It's like a quick time event type of thing with when it just didn't work at all. And the Dragon's Lair NES port was definitely worse than any other system you'd ever played on.
Yeah, I actually watched some friends stream that, and they had to beat it. The thing was, it was like a challenge cart going around different streamers, and if you finish it, you could sign the cart.
Oh wow! Yeah,
it almost broke them, but they beat it.
It's a pretty that's the game where like I bought it, took it home, and I went straight back to Babbage's at the time, and I was just like, "Here, take this back, please." I was like, went back within like half an hour. They're like, "Wow, already?"
All right, Bargain Bin.
Okay, so my version for like the worst port is the Rango on the Wii. So the Rango games, so you got the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions, which are like a 3D beat 'em up third-person shooter, and then the DS, which is more of a top-down kind of game. And all those are good. The Wii version, however, oh man, they dropped the ball and they dropped it really hard. They took out basically everything. So it's a little bit of platforming, but now because it's on the Wii, you have the pointer control. So Rango will just be running in a straight line. Then he'll have to stop, pull out his gun to shoot at enemies. Then the game just picks back up again, and then there's like I could go on a whole rant, but I'm just gonna keep it brief. So I'm just gonna say Rango on any other system, great idea. Rango on the Wii, why would you even bother?
Bones.
Jeez, this is easy. Anything ported on the Wii, the Tiger handheld, the GameCom.
Yes.
Anything on those.
That's great.
Those are worse than any of the others.
Yep.
We will save that debate for another day.
All right, number 3. Handheld consoles typically don't have the power of their TV-centric cousins, so they have to be different with the ports of the console games. What is a good handheld port of a console game? Bargain Bin?
I'm gonna go with 2 answers on this because they're both really good. So Thor on the original DS is a 2D beat 'em up by WayForward, and it's really, really good. I need to actually get in and play more. It's just so much fun. And then my other answer is The Hobbit on DS, on GBA. Remember that weird Hobbit game they released way back in like 2004, I think? It's that. And it's almost like a Zelda game.
Bones?
Well, the only game I can, because you guys know me, I don't really do handhelds, so even to give any kind of merit, it's going to be hard on this one. So it's going to be kind of hearsay, but I did hear that the Indiana Jones that was ported onto, I believe, the PSP, and it's also on the Wii. The PSP is like such a good version, and like the
I
Wii one is
confirm
just
it's
complete garbage.
fan freaking tastic on the PSP, horrifyingly bad on the Wii, slightly better on the PS2. But you heard correct. Absolutely, could easily recommend that game if you love brawlers on the PSP. Indiana Jones Staff of Kings. Jeff Tips 10 out of 10. Sorry.
No, that's good. Like I said, it's all hearsay for me because, like you say, it's good, and I've heard it from other people, but I haven't played it. Dude, I don't have much at all for a handheld collection, and most of it's
That goes for both of us.
yeah. Like I stopped handhelds at Game Gear. Like
Wow.
I didn't get anything else after that. I got a 101, and I had like 2 to 3 games on it. So like I've never continued with handhelds on for these generations. Even the new stuff that I have or newer, like DS and some 3DS games, and I don't even own a 3DS. So I've never even indulged in all these different ports, and it's crazy to think about how many games are out there that they've remastered that I haven't touched or just reported. Oh my god. I have a lot of catching up to do, guys.
You better get on it.
And Dan,
Yeah, I mean, I probably am gonna miss a lot of good games here, but what springs to mind is the Mario Kart games on the GBA, starting with the GBA. Those, and then onto the DS and 3DS. Those came out pretty well. I mean, they worked out really well in handheld mode, even though it started off on the SNES and N64. So I always thought that made the transition smoothly to a handheld console perfectly fine. And the biggest one for me is Castlevania. I mean, Castlevania started off as a pretty straightforward side scroller platformer, but then by the time I got to PlayStation, it got to like Metroidvania, type of quest seeking with a lot of stats and weapons and upgrades and complicated maps and stuff. And you would think that would not be doable on a home handheld as well, but surprisingly enough, the games that came out for the GBA, Circle of the Moon, and
Rondo of Blood.
no, Circle of the Moon, the Aria Sorrow,
Oh, that one, yeah.
those ones, is it Lament of Innocence? Is that the one? But the 3 that came out for the Game Boy Advance, those,
I think was PS2.
whatever the middle game was. Bandana should be here. He would know these right off the top of his head. The 3 came out for GBA. Those were excellent Castlevania games in their own right, and also they did a pretty good job of capturing the PS1 game as well. So Castlevania,
I should grab those if I can.
they're not cheap.
Oh, well, that's why they make things called EverDrives.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Those aren't cheap either, but they're probably cheaper than getting all 3 of those.
yeah, probably. Number 4, they can't all be winners. Name a terrible handheld version of a console game. Dan.
Yeah, I'll be the first one to jump out and say Mortal Kombat for the Game Boy. They started thank you for picking me first, because that's like the one that I can think of that's the worst. Yeah, I mean, when they start trying to bring like complicated fighting games onto like a handheld with like 2 buttons, you got your work cut out for you. And yeah, I remember that being particularly bad.
Bones, you got anything?
Yeah, I'm going right with Dan. Killer Instinct on Game Boy.
I see a trend. Bargain bin.
Now, let me preface this by starting with a lot of my dislike for this game may have just been kid me being grumpy because he wanted the console game for Christmas and he got the handheld one. So just keep that in back of your mind for this. But the game is The Incredibles: Rise of the Underminer. On the consoles, it's actually pretty fun beat 'em up, and you can play co-op with Frozone and Mr. Incredible, and they have like different. They use their powers, like you can so they shoot projectiles at you. Frozone can freeze the projectiles, and Mr. Incredible can pick them up and throw them, and it's actually really fun. I actually want to play it now, but anyway, the GBA version is just like a really bland side-scrolling beat 'em up, and it has like a really bad screen crunch problem. So yeah, and like I said, it might just be me being kind of a whiny little boy not getting what he wanted for Christmas, but just I maybe later I'll try and grab it again and see if my opinions have changed. But as it stands currently, I don't have flattering opinions about the GBA version of Rise of the Underminer.
Number 5. What is the difference between a port and a remake? Bones?
Well, a port's the same game.
Pretty
A
much.
remake is something they've remastered later on. A port is just same time they came out, same console. That's the way I look at it.
Dan?
Yeah, same thing. I would say that, I would say a port is just a direct try to make the same game exactly the same on a different console despite the hardware, and a remake is building it from the ground up, specifically with tailored to that system's capabilities.
Bargain.
I kind of gonna piggyback off DanCavDragon's answer. I'm gonna for me, Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie on Xbox 360, I consider those more ports because they have some things, more bells and whistles. Like in Banjo-Kazooie on Xbox 360, when you collect notes, you retain them, and so also Jinjos are retained. But that did come with a glitch. But we'll save that for another day. So for me, those are just ports because they don't do too much new stuff, and they just make the game look a little prettier, make it give some quality of life improvements. There you go. A remake, like Dan said, is like they're building it from the ground up and they're tailoring to that specific system. And it's kind of like, for me, that's like a best example is the Medieval on the PS4, because that game is just like it literally, like you said, built from the ground up. They added something you could like break things you couldn't break before. They added, I haven't played the original in a long time and I haven't gotten very far, so I don't know what other differences there are. But obviously graphics are a big one. So I would say, yeah, that would be my answer. Just moving a game to a new system versus completely remaking it from scratch.
Number 6. Sometimes games that started life as handhelds wind up being brought to home console, like PS2 and PS3 ports of PSP games. Was a good example of this practice. Bargain.
Okay, so a good example I think of this practice. Oh gosh, I had a good answer. Oh no, I remember now. Okay, it was the PS3 ports of the God of War PSP games, Chains of Olympus, Ghosts of Sparta, because they actually made sure to tailor the game's controls to the PS3 controller, and it works really well. Like those games play just as good as the other games. They're not as long because they're handheld games, but I would say Ghosts of Sparta and Chains of Olympus are some of the best examples of a handheld game brought to console.
I can agree with you on that because I actually played both of those games on the console. Dan?
Yeah, that was the best answer I could think of, was the God of War for the PSP. But I guess you could say, back cheating off your guess that box, our Tetris, started off as the game. I mean, it existed in other forms, computer and all that. But as far as like handhelds and consoles, it started off as the Game Boy pack-in game, and then they eventually brought a similar game to the NES, which was also a good version of that, and they added some more stuff to that. And then of course they tons of sequels, and every console ever since has had a Tetris game pretty much.
Yeah, basically.
But yeah, so I do view that as it started out on the Game Boy. And then the one recent example I can think of a handheld game that was brought to consoles is Zelda: Link's Awakening. Started off as a Game Boy game, and now
I've actually been playing that. It's really good. My brother loved the original, and he also loved the remake.
Yeah, and so now it's on Switch. But one could argue that the Switch is a handheld console too, so it's not really. But I played in dock mode, so I consider it like a TV console.
I mostly play mine docked, so I agree.
Yeah,
I think everybody in here plays it docked. I know I do, and Bones does. So
yeah, I only bring it. If I bring it with me, like while I'm on vacation or whatever, then yeah, I play it handheld. But normally it's docked, and it usually stays that way.
Yep. All right, Bones.
So,
oh, you You're not done, Dan? Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say just as a stupid aside, like, I have a friend who, his wife handles the bills and watches their budget really closely. So he bought a Switch and didn't tell his wife, so he hides it under his bed. And then he plays exclusively in handheld mode because he's afraid to put it in the dock and his wife's seeing it. So he's always sneaking around with his Switch, playing it, downstairs when she's sleeping.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my
I'm
god.
serious. So that's what I'm saying. Like, he would never dock his Switch. That's the only reason why he buys every single game. He has a PS5, but buys everything for the Switch because he needs that handheld part of it.
I've never heard of something so ridiculous in my life.
Yeah.
Would his wife make him return it if she found out?
Well, she would just probably make him
It's
sleep in
past
another room
that point now. Like, he's probably had it for months.
Well, he's had it he's had it since the system came out. Pretty
Holy
much.
crap!
He's been hiding it this entire time.
Yo,
Keeps saying,
I don't care what you say. She has to know that he has it.
No, he does. She doesn't. But
There's no way in hell she doesn't know. I'm telling
He
you.
has to figure that out by now.
She knows.
He keeps saying that he's gonna whip it out at Christmas and be like, "Hey, I got this for Christmas" or something, for myself. Or something.
She knows. I'm telling you, she knows.
Wives are just on them like
Yes, believe me, she knows. There's no way you can hide something like that for that long without her knowing.
On a similar note, this guy in Korea when the PS5 just came out bought a PS5 and he told his wife that it was a Wi-Fi adapter. And it worked for a little bit, and then she made him return it when she found out.
And so, hey guys, check this out. I mean, this is a true story too. So on Facebook they have like the free giveaway sites, and then somebody was giving away, and I think I showed you pictures of this, Chris, but somebody was giving away their Xbox One with Kinect and 2 controllers, brand new, like it's really good condition, for free, And then my wife was browsing the pages one day, and she's like, "Somebody's giving away an Xbox. Do you want it?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. You can tell them that if they're giving it away, I'll swing by and pick it up." And then the person was like, "Yeah, come get it like now." And then so I went over there and she gave it to me. It was perfect, and I was like, "What's going on here? Like, is it okay?" She goes, "Yeah." She goes, "I want this out of the house right now." So I think it's like she fought with her boyfriend or her husband or whatever, or divorced or split up, and it must have been his or something. But she just didn't want any part of it, So she was giving it away, getting it out of there.
Well, it worked for you.
Yeah, I just hope it's not like stolen or something like. And you would think if she was needing money or was doing for money, she would want money for it, but she just wanted to get rid of this thing. Yeah.
Maybe she was doing it to be spiteful.
Maybe. So I hope I don't, didn't cause any more problems. But
well, technically you didn't, but either way, sorry.
Yeah.
Bones?
I don't really have much to input on this.
No problem. Number 7. Conversely, not all transitions from handheld to console are smooth. What are some bad console ports of handheld games? Barman?
Okay, so this is also a very easy answer for me. So there's this one game on, you guys remember Spider-Man Web of Shadows on the Xbox 360, right? The PSP version of that, obviously no freaking way you could even come close to what the Xbox, the HD consoles did, so it didn't even bother trying. What it is instead is like a side-scroller where you can switch between the black and white suit, and you can make morality choices. Like at one point a girl's nagging you, you can web her mouth shut. Now granted you get bad points for it, but you can do it. And so basically that works really well on the PlayStation, on the PSP, but it was ported to PS2, and I swear it has a game-breaking glitch where you will fall through the floor and you have basically no way to avoid it. There's a spot, the floor just doesn't have collision, and down you go, and then Spider-Man just kind of hangs out in the abyss awkwardly and just kind of soft-lock the game, basically. And never once did I find a way to get around it, and I did not come across that in the PSP version. So I'm going to say if you have the PS2 version, congratulations, you got a great coaster now.
Bones? Anything for this one?
Not really, no.
All good.
Fair enough.
Dan? Anything?
yeah, same. I mean, I don't know of any. I can't think of any games that made a bad transition to the from a handheld to a console, but I'm sure they're out there. I just haven't played any.
I have a second answer. It's more of like
Go.
an honorable mention.
Go ahead.
That's fine.
That's fine.
So it's Ratchet and Clank Size Matters. like again originally PSP, and the PS2 version, well, it's not. I don't want to say it's really bad, but let's just say it kind of they didn't take the time to tailor the controls, and also this was not made by Insomniac. It was High Impact Games, and I'm wondering what was Insomniac thinking handing out their baby to someone else. But and it has this challenge that's mandatory. It's like a hoverboard racing game that's like to the point driving in a straight line. You have to practice that, and you have to win first. And I spent over an hour in one section, and I just rage quit, and I haven't come back to it yet. So I don't have a lot of flattering opinions of that. But like I said, that one section does not a bad game make.
Maybe I would say WarioWare. I know it came out for the Wii and it was pretty good with those motion controls, but I felt like the original WarioWare did some cool things, like you had to tilt the whole Game Boy and stuff like that. You know, so I thought maybe that's a game that's probably better stays on the Game Boy, I think.
Stop. WarioWare expert right here. You know the WarioWare GameCube game?
Yep.
That's legit a part of the Game Boy Advance game with some bells and whistles, and it's fantastic. So you shut your damn mouth right now.
How do they do the one where you swing to the side? You know, like you shake your whole. You know, there's certain games where you tilt your.
That's a different game. It's not the twisted one.
Oh, okay.
Though you can play that in a Game Boy player on the GameCube, but don't because you'll shred the disc.
Yeah.
All right, number 8. Sometimes differences in ports come down to the hardware. Do you think this excuses developers from making errors while porting games? Bones?
I wouldn't see why it would not excuse them. Of course, it would excuse them. Like, you're porting from a different console. Try porting something over to the Jaguar. Like, that was part of their problem. They couldn't do it. You got to excuse it, but it's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways you can go on this one. I mean, I guess you wonder, like, why bother porting this game if the hardware can't handle it? So, like, don't even bother trying. So, like, if rather than, you know, make a poor attempt, you know, you should just probably not have done it in the first place. So that's where you say, you know, the hardware limitations shouldn't be an excuse for that. You just shouldn't have tried in the first place. But then on the other hand, you're like, well, it's better to have some version of this game that I can play if I want to, even, no matter how bad it is. Better than no version of this game, you know. So at least they tried, and maybe somebody liked this, you know. So maybe somebody got enjoyment out of this. So I guess it depends on what you believe. You know, if you want to be purist about the game, or if you're just happy to they tried and you're like a big fan of the game and you want to have a version of it on a handheld.
Bargaman?
I mean, I think a lot of it kind of comes down to like we were saying, hardware things can be a real bitch sometimes. But also I think it kind of comes down to the team doing it, because more talented teams might be able to find workarounds or maybe kind of make a little compromise here. Case in point, I'm going to talk about another awesome port, 3DS version of Dragon Quest VIII. I've been playing that a bunch. I love Dragon Quest VIII, and one of I would joke as a teenager I was married to one of the party members in that game. So the 3DS version is awesome, but they did have to make a couple of cutbacks. Like, the music isn't quite as good on the 3DS version, and they also have I feel like there's another downgrade they had to make, but it's escaped me all of a sudden. But yeah, I feel like if the hardware can't handle a certain thing, maybe you could kind of tailor it something like find a workaround. But I think it kind of depends on who you ask. I feel like depending on the circumstance, you either could or could not excuse them for doing it. Like, well, like Bones said, if they can't handle it, why try in the first place? I don't want my Game Boy Advance to explode trying to make 3D graphics.
All right, number 9. Some ports of games add extra bells and whistles to the game. Do you think that makes them better? Bargaman?
I think it depends on what the bells and whistles are, and were these bells and whistles to cover up some mistake that they made. So case in point, it was gonna happen eventually. I'm sorry. Monster Madness on the PS3 had kind of had these little challenges you could do, and some of these are ridiculously hard. These challenges were not in the Xbox 360 version, and why you didn't want to do them is for the costumes you could get. They did absolutely fuck all other than look good, but I think that they were a fun addition. I just, in some instances though, not quite. Like any of the vehicle, like the vehicle controls were improved in the Xbox 60 version, but they still aren't perfect. And some of the challenges are vehicle based, so you might struggle with that. But I would, long story short, as long as they don't break anything or are covering something else that's broken.
Dan.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they add to the game without changing it too much or breaking it, it's fine. I will say there's three. I just thought of a few games that I did a good job of this, and they're ports of an arcade game. When the arcade hardware is too powerful, then they have to change it a little bit to compensate for the downgrade graphics. They add more stuff to it to make it more fun or playable at home. And a few examples like Strider for the NES versus the arcade or even the Genesis. The Genesis is a pretty good conversion of the arcade. The Strider for the for NES by Capcom had a really good story, and it was a lot different than the arcade game. It had like a map, you go around and different levels and stuff like that. Same thing with Bionic Commando. Bionic Commando was very different at on the NES than at the home, and it added a lot more story to it. And Ninja Gaiden was a straightforward side-scrolling platformer in the arcade, but to compensate for the downgraded graphics, they added the cutscenes for the first time on the NES, and that was really a big deal. And of course, they made it insanely hard as well to play. One of the most challenging NES games out there. So those are three examples where I feel like they improved when they brought the game home, and by adding stuff, and that really was done to compensate for other stuff they couldn't put in there. The other game that is a game that they did a really good job of converting this game, but on top of that they added a lot extra, and that's Super Mario Deluxe for the Game Boy Color. That they added a lot of more like unlockable type achievement type things and hidden stuff to collect in that game. I think that's kind of where the whole collect, repeat the levels and collect all the things started from, getting all the stars or whatever, because they wanted to add more playability to a game that people have already played to death on the original console.
I think the biggest knock against that version is the screen crunch. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, you had to you had to scroll up and down to certain levels to see everything. That was pretty. They should have just shrunk it down a little bit further, I guess. But yeah.
Bones.
Well, my personal experience with the extra bells and whistles is usually it's just an enticement to pick my port or that port or this port. That's the only thing that's really enticing, and that doesn't really do much for me. If it's just adding extra achievements or trophies or any of that, well, if you're just trying to make me grind even more in a game, yeah, nah, I'm good on that. It doesn't really do much for me. It doesn't make them much better. I mean, there's stuff they can change that might change the gameplay and make it a little better, or maybe add more cutscenes or something else. That would make it better, but for the most part, they don't really do a lot of that.
All right, last question. If you were put in charge of porting a game to another console and designing these bells and whistles, what game would you port and what changes would you make? What features would you add or remove? Dan?
Wow, there's a lot of things I can think of about this one, but I think so one of the things they already do, like for Mortal Kombat. No, I'll take that back. For certain games, they port, like fighting games, they port to different consoles, and then it's cool when they actually include characters exclusive for that console. So I think Soul Calibur, when they put it for the GameCube, that Link as a playable character.
Yeah.
And then I think I can't think of the exact examples, but when they bring something to Xbox, they have some exclusive character, So fighting games would obviously be something that I think they already do, but I would continue to do that. It's cool to always play, when you buy it for your console, you get exclusive characters. So they should continue doing that. The other thing that I think they would never do, and that's like is taking like a Nintendo license like Mario Kart or Punch Out and then bring it to another console, and then you can play all this, new characters. You can play like, and they have like Sonic Racing and Crash Team Racing, but it'd be cool to play combine those all in one and have like, Sonic versus Mario Racing or something like that. But
They have the Olympics. What more do you want, you greedy son of a gun?
Yeah. But they would never do that because Nintendo would, is control of all the licensing, and plus, why make one game when you can make 3 games for 3 different consoles? Like there would be no point for Sonic Team Racing anymore. So so if I could do something with that, I would make something very cross-platformy, so that everybody could play it. The only thing I would say about features I would remove or add is, if I'm porting something to the Wii, you would probably want to add some motion controls. But like Skyward Sword, porting that to the Switch, you would want to remove the motion controls probably. So those type of things, something specific to the console that doesn't work on another platform.
Bones.
I mean, if I was put in charge, I don't know what I would really do besides kind of what like Dan was saying about the changeable characters from one to the other. If I could pick a game, I'd like to see Final Fight redone, to be completely honest, since that is one of my favorite games. But I don't know what they could really do to change it to make it much better. I wouldn't want them to change too much of the graphics. I prefer the old style graphics. I wouldn't want to see that really change. But yeah, I don't really think I would be put in charge, to be honest. They would not want me in charge of that.
And Bargain Bin.
So, I guess there's no way of getting out of it, I guess. Again, that Monster Madness. I'm sorry, I just love that game. I'm sorry. It's one of my favorites too. So both the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions had things they did really well. Like, I will definitely give that the Xbox 360 version had more charm. Like, it had the loading screens, had the little tidbits about the characters. Or like when you encountered a new monster, it would like do the little cutscene introducing them, and then it would show you the name of the monster, and then there's like little bestiary, how do you pronounce that? And all those were removed in the PS3 version. And also, there's a chunk of the ending that was also removed from the PS3 version. So I would kind of make a version of all 3 for like PS5, Xbox Series X, and Switch that would kind of combine, basically takes the best of what both games did, the controls and gameplay of the PS3 version with the charm and presentation of the Xbox 360 version, and also smooth over the game, the overhaul the vehicle controls, keep the challenges but tone down the difficulty a little bit, and like those kinds of things. So that's what I would do. And if you've heard me mention Monster Madness, you haven't played it, can you just listen to me for once in your life? I think it would make things better if you did.
All right, go ahead.
You did recommend it in our previous podcast, and I definitely picked them both.
Podcasts, I think.
It was podcast. It was a podcast.
Yeah, there's at least 3 or 4 games that Bargain Bin keeps bringing up in multiple podcasts.
Yeah, I bought them all. So I trust his recommendations.
That might be a bad idea.
They don't call him Bargain Bin for nothing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have a podcast about what's the bad recommendation that you got from somebody.
That's a good idea.
And what's a good recommendation you got from somebody? What's a game somebody else recommended you totally don't get why they recommended it to you?
And you want to throw it back in their face.
On that note, game of the month. Bones?
Well, I don't really have one, but I'm going to say Monster Madness since we're hearing so much about it, because I'm looking for it right now online.
Thank you. PS3 version is the best one, but thank you.
Dan?
I'm going to have to say, even though I really haven't played it yet, but because it's just the rage right now, is Tears of the Kingdom, Legend of Zelda. Everybody and their mother is playing it, so I guess I'll have to get to it.
My mom's not either.
All right, everybody in there, father or
And
son?
Which one did
I
you say
don't
was
even-
better?
The PS3 version.
Bargain bin?
The PS3 version. Grave Danger is the subtitle.
Grave Dangers. Okay.
Yeah.
Bargain bin, what's your game, MMO?
Link's Awakening on Switch.
All right. That concludes the podcast. Thank you. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks, Bargain Bin, for coming up with the topic.
Happy to.
As always, don't blow, just leave. Later.
Good night, everybody, and thank you. And play Monster Madness, or I'll kill you.
See you later, everyone. Yep.
All right, Bones.
I'm here. I'm here.
Dan.
Hello, I'm here.
And believe it or not, Dan, Bargain Bin's name is Dan.
It's all right.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a bunch of Dans on this podcast.
I mean, Daniel is kind of a common name, and it might have something to do with the fact that it's biblical. But yes, hello, YouTube.
Yeah, no, Daniel was definitely the most popular name of the year when I was born, and every year in my class had at least 3 Dans or something.
I've met so many Daniels throughout my time in school.
So actually, for a lot of people, you know, like in school and at work, they call me Danny, and that's fine. And so that's one reason why, is because to distinguish me from other Dans.
Yeah. Call me Danny at home, and then they call me Dan at work.
Yeah.